Just to see how the judge decides to handle it, if she's going to take the verdicts now on the counts.
We're getting it right here.
Guilty.
We have guilty. This is the first count now. This is the racketeering count. Kwame Kilpatrick, guilty. Bobby Ferguson, guilty of the racketeering conspiracy count. And Bernard Kilpatrick, a hung jury on that first count. So there is one of the counts they could not agree on. Let's go to count 2. This is extortion now. This is regarding a sewer lining contract. Again, Kwame Kilpatrick, guilty of count 2 of extortion. Bobby Ferguson was also charged in this count as well, and he also is guilty. This is count 2 of extortion. Already right there, 2 guilty verdicts, up to 20 years in prison, a loss for the defense, at least on the first 2 verdicts so far.
And now we're looking at count 3, extortion here, amendment to the sewer lining contract. And of course, you could read there, if found guilty on count 3, the defendants could face up to 20 years in prison. Guilty for Kwame Kilpatrick on count 3, extortion.
And Bobby Ferguson, guilty as well.
We're keeping up with this as we go here on count 3. Once again, verdict, Bobby Ferguson, guilty on that count 3.
Now, this is, that was count 3. Count 4, this is the Baby Creek Patton Park, another one of the cases here where you were talking extortion. Kwame Kilpatrick, guilty on count 4 of that extortion. And Bobby Ferguson, that should be coming in any second now for that as well.
Any minute now.
Guilty as well on count 4.
So your thoughts real quick, Tom? I mean, guilty, 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 guilty.
Well, it's even at this early stage, this is clearly a victory for the prosecution. No question about that.
This is count 5. Again, the only defendants on this one, Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson. Bernard Kilpatrick only facing 4 counts in this trial. But another guilty verdict for Kwame Kilpatrick, found guilty of attempted extortion in count 5 in this indictment here. And it would, we'll wait, Bobby Ferguson.
Next will be Bobby, yep. And that is found guilty. Well. Now you wonder, Tom, if you see a trend here because we had an early not guilty for Bernard Kilpatrick, that's one. Hung jury, I'm sorry, yes, you're right, that's a hung jury on that, but there was 5 that they did not reach an unanimous decision on, and so we have just another 4 for him, or 3 rather, for Bernard Kilpatrick, so you wonder which other one is out there.
This is interesting. Count 7 here, another extortion count. You've got a hung jury on Kwame Kilpatrick on count 7. So the extortion regarding an outfalls contract, there's a hung jury for Kilpatrick, but a guilty verdict for Bobby Ferguson, as you can see on the screen there. As we move on now to count 8, this one had to do with an asbestos abatement project. And we see, let's see, for count 8, another hung jury for Kwame and guilty for Bobby Ferguson. So hung for Kwame and guilty for Bobby Ferguson in count 8.
Okay, that was the charges that the mayor got payments of $75,000 for services there on that one. So we're going to move now. Count 9 will be guilty. This is guilty once again for former mayor of Detroit, Kwame Kilpatrick. And count 9, extortion, repair of East Side water main.
This is a stunning, stunning victory for the prosecution. Most all guilty verdicts at this point, with a couple of hung jury counts for Kwame Kilpatrick and 1 for Bernard Kilpatrick. We move on to count 10. This is also an extortion count. This had to do with an East Side sewer repair extortion. You see under count 10 right now. Under this one, Kwame Kilpatrick was found not guilty.
Wait a minute. Non-existent count 11 through 14.
Yes, those were not in the redacted indictment. Yes. I believe that those were dropped. But for count 10, Bobby Ferguson not guilty and Kwame Kilpatrick not guilty as well for those counts there. 11 through 14 don't exist. Count 15 is also attempted extortion. You see that there. And this one, Bernard Kilpatrick, was found not guilty. So we have 1 hung for Bernard Kilpatrick, a hung jury, and 1 not guilty. Count 16 we move on to now. That is bribery. So we're done with the extortion counts now. On to the bribery counts. Kwame Kilpatrick, a hung jury for that count. And he was the only one in that one.
That's right. Count 17, this is bribery, $75,000 bribe. That is, real quickly, Kwame Kilpatrick found guilty in that. Count 18, mail fraud, that has come down too. Kwame Kilpatrick found guilty on that count as well. And that is count 18 of mail fraud with the Kilpatrick Civic Fund.
And count 19, we have a guilty verdict as well. Count 20, mail fraud, we have a guilty verdict as well. We move on to count 21. I mean, you know, we're sounding like a broken record here.
But
this is incredible.
Is important, yeah.
This is count 21. This is also mail fraud. And we can get into what some of these counts meant and what they all were, but just to get you the information as quickly as we can.
Count 21 was the check for $4,500 to the super camp via FedEx. So that might be some mail, obviously some mail fraud there. We're going now to, this is count 20. We're up to 20, we had 20, we're up to 25.
Count 25, count 26 guilty. 27 is not guilty. That was a mail fraud charge as well. Count 26 is guilty there. We're almost through these now. There's 33 counts total here among the 3 defendants. Count 28, we have a guilty verdict for Kwame Kilpatrick. Count 29.
Yeah, that's going to be another wire fraud there for 29.
And that is not guilty in count 29. We'll move on to count 31 will be the next. They're reading these awfully quickly. Count 29, we had a not guilty. Is that right? Yes. Count 29, not guilty.
And now we're up to count 30. That's wire fraud, letters soliciting donation via fax. And as I read here, as we keep track of this, this is Kwame Kilpatrick will either be found guilty or not guilty of that count.
Count 29 was not guilty. Count 30 here. Still waiting for that one. A little bit of a delay in reading this. Tom, as we wait for this to come in, I mentioned, you know, maybe stunning is not the right word, but just an overwhelming victory for the prosecution in this case.
It is, but the other thing that I think is telling and I think very, very comforting is
31 through 33 guilty, we have just heard. Okay.
Is the fact that there actually are some not guilties in there. It means the jury really looked at each and every count very carefully, and I think that is a very powerful message that should be sent to the community as large. These people really took their job seriously.
They did their work.
They did.
And looked at every case and the evidence. And I remember when we were talking to Heather about this, I'm sorry, we were just told in our ears here, 33 through
37. 37 is the not guilty. That is subscribing false tax return. That was the lower.
And that was for Bernard Kilpatrick.
Correct.
37 not guilty. So it seems that Bernard Kilpatrick certainly faring the best here. And we're going to look at this in just a second and break it down. Bernard Kilpatrick was found guilty of 1, I believe. So I believe it was 2 not guilty for Bernard, 1 hung, and 1 guilty for Bernard Kilpatrick. Ferguson was guilty on most, perhaps not guilty. We'll go down and break these down. And most guilty for Kwame Kilpatrick.
Yeah. Well, Bernard, they found him guilty of subscribing a false tax return, which would be, of course, failed to disclose income of at least $150,000. He stated his income at $220,000. Guilty in that charge. And that is, I believe, 5 years is the sentence for that, Tom?
We're up to 3.
I think it's actually up to 3.
Up to 3.
Up to 3 years. Failing to disclose at least $150,000 in income was count 38 there, which was the guilty count for Bernard Kilpatrick. Okay, so here we go. We'll break this down for you in total, you know, the guilty, not guilty, and whatnot as we kind of tally up our scorecard here. But Chuck, I guess just real quickly, overall thoughts from you when you hear this.
Well, obviously a very, very tragic day for the defendants. This is a huge blow to them. For the prosecution, I think this is quite a victory. I think it's something that we just talked about with Tom Cramer about some of the defeats that the U.S. Attorney has had prior to this. I think she'll look at this and say, I've just about made up for any of those. And if she ever had any political aspirations, this might be a good time to announce that she wants to succeed Carl Levin. But really, this is you know, when you look at the defendants, you know, this has got to be a huge defeat. Of course, as you said, Bernard Kilpatrick seems to have fared the best on this, but Kwame Kilpatrick, former mayor of this town, Bobby Ferguson, businessman in this town, this is going to be a very, very sad day for them and for their families.